Something has just happened that Keir Starmer would much rather had gone unnoticed. After months of denial, accusations, and a defiant stance against criticism, the Labour leader has been forced into a dramatic U-turn. It wasn't a decision taken willingly. It was imposed by circumstances he could no longer ignore. What has pushed the Prime Minister into one of the most embarrassing reversals of his leadership? Why now? And what is he trying to keep out of the spotlight? Before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Because what's at stake here goes far beyond party politics. It strikes at the very core of a scandal that has for years been downplayed, sidelined, and hidden from public view. This is a political reversal of such magnitude that it simply cannot be ignored. Keir Starmer, who once rejected the idea of a national investigation into grooming gangs, going so far as to label such calls part of an extremist narrative, has now been forced to backtrack and authorize a full-scale statutory inquiry. And he hasn't done it out of conviction, but because overwhelming evidence and mounting political pressure left him with no other choice. In a move that caught many by surprise, the Prime Minister has announced the launch of a formal inquiry, backed by legal authority, into the sexual exploitation gangs that have operated across towns and cities in the UK for decades. This is no mere review. It is a legally binding investigation, with powers to summon witnesses and establish accountability at every level of government. The scope of this inquiry is comparable to the Post Office Horizon scandal. But this time, the subject is the systematic abuse of children and an institutional cover-up that has spanned generations. Starmer claims he made the decision after carefully reviewing the report authored by Baroness Louise Casey, whom he himself appointed earlier this year to lead a national audit. According to his account, Casey initially did not see the need for statutory investigation. However, upon reviewing the data, testimonies, and the sheer scale of institutional failure, she changed her position. The Prime Minister says he read the report word for word, and on that basis, accepted the recommendation to proceed under the Inquiries Act 2005. That means legal protections for witnesses, compulsory testimony, and unprecedented levels of public scrutiny. But the timing of this announcement raises questions. Just days earlier, the Conservative Party had tabled a motion in Parliament calling for precisely this type of judicial inquiry. Reform UK had already made it a central pledge in their election manifesto. Meanwhile, the voices of victims, whistleblowers, and campaigners had been growing louder by the day. Now, rather than a show of leadership, Starmer's U-turn appears more like a reaction born of panic. Tory MP Cami Baden was blunt in her criticism, accusing the Prime Minister of lacking principles and relying on external reports to form his opinions. She added that this wasn't an isolated case but part of a broader pattern of reversals, from winter fuel payments to his muddled stance on the definition of a woman. According to her, Starmer spent 6 months resisting action, only to eventually do what others had already called for. From the opposition benches, Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp went even further. He accused the Labour leader of smearing those who demanded justice, only to adopt their position when the pressure became unbearable. Philp condemned what he described as a systematic cover-up of mass rapes, where authorities prioritized racial sensitivities over the protection of vulnerable young girls. It's a damning accusation. Nigel Farage also spoke out. Although he welcomed the announcement, he made it clear that he didn't see it as a moral reckoning, but rather a matter of political survival. This must not become another whitewash, he warned. Victims deserve justice, and those responsible must face the full weight of the law. Reform UK's deputy leader Richard Tice didn't hold back either, stating that Labour was once again copying reform policy. In his view, Starmer's U-turn was driven entirely by fear of losing ground to the rising reform movement. And he's not wrong. Just a few months ago, Starmer flatly rejected the need for national inquiry. Now, with reform gaining momentum in the polls and the grooming gang issue becoming a national flashpoint, his room to maneuver has vanished. Still, beyond the political drama, we must not lose sight of what truly matters: justice for thousands of children, mostly white, working-class girls, who were systematically abused, trafficked, and exploited by organized grooming networks, predominantly made up of men of Pakistani heritage. And worse still, public institutions deliberately failed them. Time and again, local authorities, police forces, and social services chose not to act, fearful of being accused of racism. Victims were silenced, ignored, and in some cases even blamed for their own abuse. Baroness Case's report lays bare how cultural sensitivities led to structural negligence. The licensing system for taxis also came under fire. Many of the perpetrators were officially licensed drivers who used their jobs to target and abuse underage girls. Paul Waugh, Labour MP for Rochdale, welcomed the government's decision, but stressed that the inquiry must produce tangible results, not further delays. Former magistrate and now Reform UK MP Sarah Poaching was even more direct. This cannot be swept under the rug again. Victims and affected communities have waited long enough. The stakes now could not be higher. The inquiry must be fast, thorough, and uncompromising. No sacred cows. No protected institutions. No hedging around the truth. Those who played a part in the cover-up, whether in local government, policing, or social care, must not only be removed from their posts, they must also face criminal prosecution. Because covering up child abuse out of fear of being politically incorrect is not a clerical error, it is a criminal act. As Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick put it, Starmer didn't lead, he was dragged, kicking and screaming, into doing the right thing. Now the state must ensure that justice is served for the victims and punishment is delivered for the perpetrators. Yes, Starmer has finally done the right thing. But he doesn't deserve praise. He didn't lead, he followed. This wasn't an act of courage, it was damage control. And the victims, they have waited long enough. Now the entire country must stay vigilant and ensure this inquiry doesn't become just another slow-motion cover-up disguised as justice. In other news, Keir Starmer's effort to rebuild ties with the European Union through a new post-Brexit agreement may be in jeopardy due to potential opposition from France. According to recent reports, Paris is considering blocking the UK's participation in a key European defence initiative. Sources suggest that France is restricting access for British firms to the European defence industry programme, effectively excluding the UK from a market worth billions of pounds. French diplomats have reiterated that the programme should remain exclusive to EU member states, along with Norway and Ukraine. This development comes as President Emmanuel Macron continues to push for a joint defence fund within the European bloc. Just weeks ago, both governments declared a new chapter of cooperation after years of strained relations. However, a senior Brussels official, quoted by The Telegraph, stated, "The opportunity to back up that goodwill with action was dismissed almost immediately." Keir Starmer has repeatedly argued that the UK should play a role in European defence comparable to that of a member state. Yet diplomatic sources claim that, while Macron smiles alongside Starmer in front of the cameras, he is working behind the scenes to keep Britain out of the EU's key military investment programs. In response, a government spokesperson confirmed that although the UK seeks closer collaboration with the European Union, NATO will remain the cornerstone of Britain's national security strategy. Meanwhile, Industry Minister Sarah Jones has declined to confirm whether the UK was briefed in advance about Israel's recent strikes on Iran. Sources suggest that, unlike the United States and Germany, Britain may not have received prior warning. Jones expressed concern over the seriousness of the situation, describing it as both grave and dangerous. She added that the government is committed to de-escalation in the region, although she could not disclose details of what intelligence, if any, was available to ministers ahead of the attacks. Nonetheless, she affirmed that the UK will work with its allies to urge all parties involved to show restraint. From the opposition benches, figures such as Kimi Badenoch and Preeti Patel stressed the importance of preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons and the urgent need to stabilize the region. They warned of growing global threats and emphasized Britain's duty to be prepared to defend its interests. They also underlined the necessity of coordinated diplomatic action with international partners to prevent further escalation in the Middle East. In this context, David Lammy cancelled a planned trip to the United States due to the unfolding crisis. At the same time, the UK has confirmed it has no plans to intervene in Israel's defense against Iranian drones. According to The Times, the Ministry of Defense has no intention of offering military support to the Israeli state, despite the fact that allies such as Jordan have already intercepted Iranian missiles that crossed into their airspace. The situation continues to evolve. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss expressed her support for Israel's overnight offensive, which reportedly eliminated Iranian commander Hussein Salami and destroyed key installations. However, the strikes have prompted calls for restraint and have triggered a more cautious response from international actors such as the United States. And that brings us to the end of today's report. What are your thoughts on the topics we've covered? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more news and analysis on British current affairs. We'll see you in the next video.